Before today's video starts, we want to bring you a word from our sponsor, NordVPN. I was recently on vacation and I experienced a series of mishaps. One of my pieces of luggage was lost, a hotel staff member sprayed bleach on my clothes, and my brand new watch was stolen. But the entire time I was away, the one thing I didn't worry about was my online security because I used NordVPN. I felt secure banking, shopping online, and checking my YouTube account on both my phone and my laptop because I knew I was protected. If you want to protect yourself while you're online, NordVPN is giving all criminally listed viewers a special deal of 75% off a 3-year plan, and then if you use the promo code criminally listed, you'll get a month for free. Just go to nordvpn.com/criminally listed, and at the checkout, use the promo code criminally listed. NordVPN is super fast and it has unlimited bandwidth. It is also the best way to stay anonymous online. NordVPN uses double data encryption for increased anonymity, and the encryption is military grade. So protect yourself when you're online at home, on vacation, or even at the shopping mall by getting NordVPN. Just go to nordvpn.com/criminally listed to save 75% on a 3-year contract and use the promo code criminally listed to get a month free. Number 3. Roxanne Allee. In September 1991, 34-year-old Roxanne Allee was working as a sheriff's deputy in Harris County, Texas. For the past 4 years, she had been working in the Harris County Jail. Roxanne's husband, Ken, also worked as a sheriff's deputy, and he too worked at the jail. They had 2 children together, one who was 14 and the other was 12. On the evening of September 30th, 1991, Roxanne was off duty. At about 6 p.m., she went to the Green Points Mall in Houston to do some shopping. At about 7:30, she was walking in the parking lot and 2 men started following her. At gunpoint, they forced her to get into her Ford Aerostar van. An hour and a half later, Roxanne's van was found about 4.5 miles from the mall. It was engulfed in flames. The fire was put out, and the firefighters discovered that there was no one in the van. They did find the burnt remnants of Roxanne's badge and her identity card. They also found some blood in the van. Roxanne's service weapon and her purse were missing. The area where her van was found was searched. In a field about half a mile from her van, her body was found. She had been shot 3 times in the head. Her purse and her service pistol were not with her body, and they have never been found. The sheriff's department thinks that Roxanne could have been shot with her own service weapon, but since it has never been found, they can't say for sure. The sheriff's department thinks that the 2 men wanted to carjack Roxanne. They think that after they got Roxanne into her van, they saw her badge or her ID card, and they realized she was a sheriff's deputy. They panicked and they killed her. Then they dumped her body and torched the van. Another possibility is that Roxanne tried to resist them or tried to fight them off, and they ended up killing her. Roxanne's husband, Kent, continued to work with the sheriff's department until 2012. He continued to work at the jail, and whenever he encountered inmates who matched the description of Roxanne's killers, he would wonder if they were the ones who shot his wife and the mother of his children 3 times in the head. The men who forced Roxanne into her van were described as black men in their late 20s or early 30s. One was about 5'9" and had no facial hair. The other one was tall and muscular, and he possibly had a mustache. The sheriff's department has a video recording from a gas station that was near the area where the van was found. On the video, it shows two men in a van that looks like Roxanne's van, and they purchase some gas. An employee at the gas station said he saw a distraught woman who matched Roxanne's description sitting in the van. Unfortunately, the quality of the video is too poor to positively identify the two men. The sheriff's department is hoping that video technology will get better and they'll be able to get a clear image from the video. Or they are hoping that someone who knows something about the murder will come forward with information. There is currently a reward of $30,000 for information that leads to an arrest. Roxanne's family is hoping that someone's conscience will get the better of them and they'll come forward and give them some closure. Number 2. Marry Opitz and marry Hare. January 16, 1981 was a cool evening in Fort Myers, Florida. 17-year-old Mary Opitz went to the Edison Mall with her mother and her brother to buy a present for a family friend. On the way out of the mall, they bumped into another friend of the family. Opitz did not want to stand around and chat, so she went out to the car alone. When her mother and brother came out to the car, Opitz was nowhere to be found. It was as if she vanished into thin air between the mall and the car. Her family reported her missing later that night. The police thought she might have run away, but her family did not think that was likely. Less than a month later, on February 11, 1981, 18-year-old Mary Hare drove to the Edison Mall to pick up her mother, who was working there. Hare parked in the same parking lot where Mary Opitz's family had parked. When Hare's mother came out to the parking lot, she discovered that her daughter had vanished. Her car was unlocked and abandoned in the parking lot. No other trace of Hare was found. People immediately saw connections between the disappearances. Both were named Mary, they were similar in age, and they disappeared from the same parking lot less than a month apart from each other. They also shared similar physical features. They were approximately the same in size, they both had dark hair, and they were both attractive. Both Marys grew up in New York, and they both had slight accents. They both attended the same high school, and Hare frequently went to the restaurant where Opitz worked as a dishwasher. But it's unclear if the young women knew each other. Neither young woman had any problems at home. Also, they both left money at home and in their bank accounts, so it seemed unlikely that they ran away. There is one significant difference in the cases. On May 31st, 1981, about 3 months after she went missing, Mary Hare's body was found in a ditch in an undeveloped area about 15 miles from the mall. Her body was fully clothed, and she had been stabbed twice in the back. The area was searched for Opitz's remains, but they were not found. In fact, her remains have never been located. There is one leading suspect in the cases, and that is a man named Christopher Wilder. Wilder was born in March 1945 in Sydney, Australia. His father was a member of the American Navy. He had met the woman who would become his wife and give birth to Wilder while his ship was being repaired in Ryde, Australia. Wilder spent much of his childhood living on naval bases throughout the United States. Around 1960, his family relocated to North Ryde, Australia, and Wilder attended high school there. On January 11, 1965, there was a double murder on Wanda Beach in Sydney, Australia. The victims were two 15-year-old best friends, Marianne Schmidt and Christine Chirac. They both have been stabbed and slashed to death. The case is considered one of Australia's most notorious unsolved murders. 2 years before the murder, Wilder had been convicted of sexually assaulting a girl, and he received a suspended sentence. At the time of the murders, Wilder was 19 and he was living near Wanda Beach. He was supposedly questioned by the police, but he wasn't named as a suspect at the time. Then, in the ensuing years, other women accused Wilder of sexual assault. Wilder would approach young women with a camera and say he was from a modeling agency. He would then ask if they wanted to model for him. Once he got them to an isolated area, he would force them to undress, and sometimes he would sexually assault them. Then in 1969, after a 4-year investigation, Wilder became a suspect in the Wanda Beach murders. But the police did not have a chance to question him. Before the police could question him again, in May 1969, Wilder, who had dual American and Australian citizenship, moved to the United States. He settled in Florida and he got work in construction. At the time, Florida's construction market was booming and he had no problem finding work. He also continued to assault women by pretending to be a photographer with a modeling agency. He was arrested several times, but he always avoided jail time. Wilder invested his money in several businesses, and it wasn't long before he was financially successful. He lived in a nice house in Boynton Beach, Florida, and he drove fancy cars, like a Porsche 911. He even drove his Porsche in races, and he had his own race team. In early 1981, when Mary Opitz and Mary Hare went missing, Wilder was living in Boynton Beach. Boynton Beach is on the opposite side of Florida for Fort Myer, but it's only a 2.5-hour drive. And as Wilder's later criminal activity would prove, he was not adverse to traveling. In late 1982, Wilder was visiting his parents in Australia. He was arrested after he pulled a modeling scam on two 15-year-old girls. Shortly after he was arrested, he was released on bail. He then flew back to the United States. In June 1983, Wilder was back home in Boynton Beach. On June 27th, 20-year-old Sherry Lynn Ball left her family's home in Boca Raton, Florida. She told them she was going to New York to be a model. But her first stop was Boynton Beach to meet a friend. A day or two later, she called a former boyfriend and told him that she was in Ashland, Virginia with a friend. She did not tell him the name of her friend. That was the last time anyone heard from Sherry Lynn Ball. 4 months later, her remains were found near Shelby, New York. However, she was not identified until 2014 when her DNA was matched to the remains. Because of the state of the remains, no cause of death could be determined. Christopher Wilder is considered the prime suspect in her murder, but there is no physical evidence that connects him to the killing. On July 6, 1983, about 3 weeks after Ball went missing, 18-year-old model and actress Tammy Leppard vanished from Cocoa Beach, Florida, which is about 147 miles from Boynton Beach. She had gone out with a male friend, and they had gotten into an argument. Because of the argument, her friend had left her in the parking lot of a gas station. Leppard's friends and family never saw her or heard from her again. Once again, Wilder is the lead suspect, but no evidence definitively connects him to Leppard's disappearance. Her remains have never been found. On February 18, 1984, the body of an unidentified woman was found in Davie, Florida, about 40 miles from Boynton Beach. She was between the ages of 21 and 35. She was 5'4", and she weighed around 120 pounds. She had blonde or strawberry blonde hair and hazel eyes. She had been dead for about 2 days before she was found face down in a canal. She had been strangled to death. Her identity has never been determined. Wilder is the lead suspect in the murder, but there is no evidence that definitively proves he is the killer. On February 26, 1984, 20-year-old Rosario Gonzalez went to work as a model at the Miami Grand Prix. In the middle of the afternoon, she went missing. Her family reported her missing that evening. On March 5, 1984, about 8 days after Gonzalez went missing, 23-year-old Elizabeth Kenyon vanished from Coral Gables, Florida. Kenyon was an aspiring model and a finalist in the Miss Florida USA pageant. She and Wilder knew each other. In fact, Wilder had asked her to marry him, but she turned him down. Kenyon was last seen at a gas station in Coral Gables. She was with a man who was driving a gray Cadillac. At the time of her disappearance, Wilder owned a gray Cadillac. An employee at the gas station also identified Wilder as the man who was with her. Kenyon's family was sure that Wilder was involved in her disappearance. So Kenyon's family hired a private investigator. After doing some investigating, the private investigator thought that Wilder may not have just been responsible for Kenyon's disappearance, but he may have also been responsible for the disappearance of Rosario Gonzalez. Gonzalez had gone missing from the Miami Grand Prix, and the private investigator discovered that Wilder was at the Grand Prix on the day she went missing. The private investigator questioned Wilder, but he denied having anything to do with the disappearances of the two women. The private investigator then passed on his findings to the detectives who were investigating Kenyon's and Gonzalez's disappearances. A reporter with the Miami Herald heard that Wilder was a suspect in the disappearances of the two women. She wrote an article that did not name Wilder, but she described him in a way that any of his neighbors and friends would have known that he was the suspect in the disappearances of the two women. With so much attention on him, Wilder decided to flee the area. On March 15, 1984, 15-year-old Colleen Osborne, who lived in Daytona Beach, Florida, decided to skip school and go to the beach. She did not come home that evening, and she was reported missing 4 days later. Her body was found 3 weeks later in a shallow grave, about 65 miles from the beach. Because of the state of the body, the cause of death could not be determined. They also couldn't identify her. Colleen's remains weren't identified until 27 years later, thanks to a DNA match. Colleen is not an official victim of Wilder's, but it was later learned that he was in the Daytona Beach area on the day she went missing. On March 18, 1984, Wilder was on Merritt Island, Florida. He encountered 21-year-old Teresa Ferguson at a local mall. Ferguson had always dreamed of being a model. Her body was found in a canal about 80 miles from the mall where she was last seen 3 days later. She had been strangled to death. On March 20th, 1984, Wilder kidnapped 19-year-old Linda Grober in broad daylight from a department store in Tallahassee, Florida. He drove her to a motel in Bainbridge, Georgia. Once he got her into the motel room, he superglued her eyes shut. He tortured her by electrocuting her and sexually assaulting her multiple times. But Grober was eventually able to fight off Wilder, and he fled the motel room, fearing that he might be arrested. Grober managed to find help, but by the time the police arrived, Wilder was long gone. Since Grober had been transported over state lines, the FBI was called in. Agents showed Grober a photo lineup, and she identified Wilder as her kidnapper. The FBI then launched a manhunt for Wilder. The problem was that they had no idea where he was going. It turned out that he went to Texas. On March 23, 1984, 23-year-old Terry Walden left her family's home in Beaumont, Texas. She was planning to go to the university campus to study, and then she was going to the mall. But she did not come home that evening, and her husband reported her missing. Her husband told the police that 2 days earlier, a man had approached her in public and asked her to be a model in a photo shoot. Walden's body was found in a canal outside Beaumont 3 days after she went missing. She had been stabbed 3 times. Not long after she went missing, Wilder's car was found abandoned by the police in Texas. In the trunk of the car, they found forensic evidence that connected him to the murder of Teresa Ferguson. 2 days after Terry Walden disappeared, Wilder was in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, which is about 500 miles from Beaumont. On that day, 20-year-old Susan Logan disappeared from the Penn Square Mall in Oklahoma City. The next day, her body was found nearly 300 miles away in a reservoir near Manhattan, Kansas. There were signs that she had been tortured. The cause of death was a single stab wound to the chest. 4 days after Logan was kidnapped, Wilder was spotted at a mall in Grand Junction, Colorado. He was asking women if they wanted to pose for him. On that same day, Cheryl Lynn Bonaventure went missing from the same mall. Just over a month later, her body was found outside of Kanab, Utah. She had been stabbed multiple times and shot once. On April 1, 1984, 6 days after Bonaventure went missing, Wilder was watching a fashion show at the Meadow Mall in Las Vegas, Nevada. Wilder was in the background of several photographs of the fashion show. At the fashion show, several people saw him talking to one of the models, 17-year-old Michelle Korfman. After chatting for a few minutes, the two were seen leaving the mall together. Michelle's parents reported her missing that evening. 5 weeks later, Michelle's body was found on the side of the road in the Angeles National Park. She had asphyxiated to death. Wilder had pressed her face into the soil at the side of the highway, and he held her face down until she stopped breathing. 2 days after Michelle went missing, Wilder was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. The day after he made the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, Wilder lured 16-year-old Tina Risico away from a mall in Los Angeles, California. He did not kill Tina right away. He tortured her and sexually assaulted her. He then made her his road companion. Together, they traveled to Gary, Indiana. On April 10th, he got Tina to help him lure 16-year-old Danette Wilt from a mall in Gary to his car. He held both of them captive for 2 days. On April 12th, he drove to a forest near Watkins Glen, New York. Wilder led Danette out to the woods and stabbed her 3 times in the chest. However, Danette did not die. She was able to walk out of the forest and she found help. She ultimately survived her wounds. A few hours later, with Tina still as his captive, Wilder drove to Phelps, New York. When he got there, he went to a local mall. Wilder turned into the parking lot of the mall just after 33-year-old Beth Dodge pulled into the parking lot. Wilder parked his car and got out. He walked over to Dodge's car and at gunpoint, he forced her to get into the back seat. He then got Tina into Dodge's car and they drove off. About 30 minutes later, Wilder pulled over on a dirt road. He pulled Dodge out of the car and then shot her through the heart, killing her. Her body was found later that same day. Wilder and Tina then traveled to Boston, Massachusetts. Amazingly, Wilder bought Tina a plane ticket to Los Angeles, where he had kidnapped her from, and he let her go. Tina was deeply traumatized by her 9 days as Wilder's captive. As a result, she did not call the police right away. Instead, she got on the plane, flew home, and then got in contact with the police. She told them that Wilder was heading to Canada. State troopers in the northeastern United States were put on high alert. On April 13th, Wilder had stopped for gas in Colebrook, New Hampshire, which is about 10 miles from the Canadian border. Some state troopers who were on patrol recognized Wilder, and they told him that they wanted to talk to him. Wilder got into a struggle with one of the troopers, and Wilder's gun went off. The bullet went through Wilder's body and entered the trooper's chest. Wilder managed to get free, and then he shot himself. This time, it was a kill shot. 39-year-old Christopher Wilder, who was nicknamed the Beauty Queen Killer, was dead. The state trooper survived his wound. In a 6-week rampage, it's believed that Wilder killed at least 9 women and kidnapped 3 more. Before his 6 weeks of carnage, it's suspected that Wilder killed at least 7 other young women. This includes Mary Opitz and Mary Hare. However, since Wilder is dead, we may never know for sure if he killed them. But people who think that Wilder killed the 2 Marys point out that Wilder's favorite hunting ground was shopping malls, and the Marys were physically similar to Wilder's other victims. So unless evidence proves Wilder did not commit the 2 murders, he will remain the prime suspect. Number 1. Kim DeLange, Anna Chebetnoy, and Misty Copsey. On July 22, 1988, 15-year-old Kim DeLange went to the Hi-Ho Mall in Puyallup, Washington. At around 11 p.m., she was recorded on camera at the mall's arcade. Kim was a regular at the arcade, and the staff knew her. Sadly, Kim did not return home that night, and she was reported missing. Nearly a month later, on August 21st, her remains were found in a field off a logging road just over 20 miles from the mall. If her cause of death is known, it has never been made public. Just over 2 years later, on August 11, 1990, 14-year-old Anna Chebetnoy was also at the Hi-Ho Mall. She too went missing from the mall. Anna's remains were found 13 months later, on September 17, 1991. Her remains were found in the same field where Kim DeLange's remains were found. In fact, They were found about 100 feet from each other. Just like with Kim, if Anna's cause of death is known, it has never been made public. In the early 1980s, Seattle and Tacoma, Washington suffered a rash of murders of teenage girls and women. The murders were mostly committed between 1982 and 1984. At least 2 more were committed in the late 1980s, and 2 more were committed in the 1990s. The murderer was nicknamed the Green River Killer. A man named Corey Bobber, who lived in Tacoma, was obsessed with bringing the Green River Killer to justice. Bobber has been described as an eccentric. He has never worked in law enforcement, and he has no training in criminal investigation. Bobber was convinced that he knew the identity of the Green River Killer. He was sure that the Green River Killer was a former acquaintance of his named Randy Axiger. Axiger had told Bobber a detail about the Green River murders that was not public knowledge. Axiger explained that he knew the detail because he had met a detective who worked on the case at a wedding. The detective was drunk, and he had let the information slip. Bobber did not believe his story about the drunk detective, and he became convinced that Axiger was the Green River Killer. Bobber had studied cases of missing and murdered females in Washington state, looking for clues that could connect Axiger to the Green River murders. Bobber kept a journal and extensive notes regarding his investigation. On September 13, 1992, Bobber was looking at the case of Kim DeLange and Anna Chvetnoy. He was interested in their cases because they both went missing from Puyallup, and his lead suspect, Randy Axiger, was also from Puyallup. As he looked at their cases, he thought he saw a pattern. Not only did they go missing from the same mall, and their remains were found 100 feet from each other in the same field, he thought that there was also a pattern to the dates that they went missing. Kim and Anna went missing 2 years and 1 month apart from each other. Although 2 cases are not enough data to establish a pattern, Bobber became convinced that another girl would go missing 2 years and a month after Anna went missing. Bobber figured this out in September 1992, which is 2 years and a month after Anna went missing. That meant if the killer did have a pattern, a girl would go missing from Puyallup at any time. Bobber claimed as soon as he figured it out, he called the Pierce County Youth Emergency Services, which is where reports about runaways were filed. He said he left a message on their answering machine. Then the next day, he called the police and warned them that another girl would be murdered. The officer who answered the call did not take him seriously. 3 days later, on September 17, 1992, 14-year-old Misty Copsey and her friend, Trina Bavard, were dropped off at the fair in Puyallup. Misty lived about 8 miles away from the fairgrounds in Spanaway, Washington. They were supposed to take the bus home at 8:40 p.m., but they did not end up taking the bus. Misty's mother, Diana, worked overnight as a caregiver for a senior with Alzheimer's. Misty called her and asked if her friend, Reuben Schmidt, could drive her home. Diana knew who Schmidt was. He was an 18-year-old who wanted to have sex with Misty. Diana did not like him or trust him. Diana told Misty to find someone else to give her a ride home. At the end of her shift, Diana went home, and she was horrified to find out that Misty wasn't there. Diana tried to report her missing, but the 911 dispatcher told her that Misty had probably just run away. The dispatcher then told her that the police couldn't do anything for 30 days. Diana then called Schmidt. He told her that he did not see Misty that night. Diana called Trina, and Trina said that the last time she saw Misty, she was walking to the bus. Over the next 6 days, Diana looked for her 14-year-old daughter. She was then able to convince the leader of the Pierce County Youth Emergency Services to help her. He got in touch with a detective in Puyallup, and the detective began to investigate Misty's disappearance. But everything he saw indicated that Misty had run away. Misty's parents were divorced, and Diana was a bit of a drinker. Diana had a conviction for welfare fraud. Also, months earlier, Diana had filed a report saying that Misty had run away. Diana explained that she thought Misty had run away, but it turned out that she was just in her bedroom. All of this led the detective to think that Diana was a dishonest drunk. The detective also talked to 2 girls who went to school with Misty. One said she thought she got a call from Misty after she went missing. She said she was in Olympia, Washington. The second girl said she saw Misty 4 days after she went missing at the fair in Puyallup. But there were problems with the 2 girls' stories. The girl who received the phone call admitted that the girl who called her did not identify herself as Misty. She said she just recognized her voice. Also, neither of the girls were close friends with Misty. Amazingly, the detective did not interview Trina Bavard, who was with Misty on the night she disappeared. Nor did he interview Reuben Schmidt. Nevertheless, the detective decided that Misty ran away and he closed the case. A couple of weeks later, Bobber learned of Misty's disappearance. He immediately called Misty's mother Diana and told her that she was probably killed by Randy Axiger, who he thought was the Green River Killer. Diana, who was desperate for answers, listened to Bobber. He then called her every day that week. But then, several weeks later, at the urging of the police, Diana filed a restraining order against Bobber. She later withdrew the restraining order because she felt guilty. In December 1992, nearly 3 months after Misty went missing, the police admitted that she may have been the victim of foul play. But they did not do much investigating. Corey Bobber, on the other hand, was dedicated to investigating Misty's disappearance. Bobber thought that there might be clues in the same field where Kim and Anna's remains were found. So he organized a search. On February 7th, 1993, about a dozen people, including Misty's mother and her aunt, came out to search the area. Not long after they started their search, a pair of blue jeans, a sock, and a pair of underwear were found. The clothing was found about a 10-minute walk from where Kim and Anna's remains were found. Diana recognized the blue jeans as the pants Misty wore on the night she went to the fair. While Bobber was excited by the find, in the eyes of the police, the discovery of the clothing made Bobber a suspect. They thought that he knew more about Misty's disappearance than he was letting on. Also, a detective had spent 6 hours searching that same area a week prior, and he had found nothing. So the police thought that Bobber may have planted the clothes there. The police weren't alone in thinking that the clothes had been planted. Bobber also thought that the clothes had been planted. Days before the search, he told a reporter that they were going to search the area. The story about the search ran 2 days before the actual search. Bobber thought that the Green River Killer read about the upcoming search and he planted the clothing there. Bobber thought he did this because Misty's body was elsewhere and he planted the clothing to throw off investigators. However, forensic testing was done on the clothing and it was determined that the clothing had been there for some time. Trina was then interviewed by a detective named Jim Doyon. Doyon had worked on the Green River Killer case and he had taken an interest in Misty's disappearance. Doyon showed Trina a photo of the jeans that were found, and she thought that they were the jeans Misty wore to the fair. Trina said that on the night of the fair, they called Reuben Schmidt to pick them up. But Schmidt said he couldn't pick them up because he didn't have any gas or money to get gas. Trina said that she had walked home. Misty said that she was going to take the bus. Trina said she last saw her walking towards the bus. Detectives then interviewed Reuben Schmidt. Diana strongly believes he is involved in Misty's disappearance. Also, the owner of a barbecue restaurant where Schmidt sometimes worked came to the police. The man told the police that Schmidt had said he knew where Misty was buried and it was 6 miles away from where the clothes were found. The police asked Schmidt if he told the owner of the restaurant that information, and he did not deny it. It turned out that Schmidt's grandmother had a farm that was 6 miles from the clearing where the clothing was found. The detectives asked Schmidt what he did after he talked on the phone with Misty on the night she disappeared. Schmidt said that he did not know because he had blacked out. He said that he had suffered from blackouts since the age of 5. He said when he came to, it was the next morning and he was at his grandmother's farm. Schmidt volunteered to take a polygraph exam. But during the exam, it looked like Schmidt was trying to manipulate the results by trying to put himself to sleep. The results of the polygraph exam were inconclusive. He took another polygraph exam, and this time, he passed. So he was ruled out as a suspect. But the detectives never followed up on anything Schmidt said. They did not search his car, and they did not search his grandmother's farm. Then the detectives learned that Trina Bavard had not been honest with them. She said that she had walked home on the night Misty went missing. But she really had called her boyfriend, a 23-year-old man named Michael Reiner, and he picked her up. The police looked into Reiner's background and they noticed some unusual things. When he was 16, he was accused of picking up an 11-year-old girl in his car and then sexually assaulting her at knife point. But he never faced charges regarding the accusation. Reiner also had friends in common with Kim and Anna. And finally, he was 23 and he was dating Trina, who was only 14. The detectives confronted Trina and she admitted that she had called Reiner for a ride. Trina said that before Reiner arrived, she offered Misty a ride, but Misty did not want to get a ride from Reiner. The detectives got the sense that Misty wasn't comfortable around Reiner because he had come on to her. Misty said she was just going to walk home, which was about 8 miles away. Trina said that Misty had walked away before Reiner showed up. Trina said that Reiner then drove her home, which took about 10 minutes. During the drive, Trina told Reiner that Misty was walking home alone. Trina said that after Reiner dropped her off, he drove away, and she assumed he went home. After talking to Trina, Reiner quickly became the prime suspect in the case. The detectives thought that after he dropped off Trina, he found Misty walking home and he convinced her to get into his car. He then killed her and disposed of her body. But while they had the theory they had no evidence to prove it. So they investigated Reiner. Then in March 1993, 6 months after Misty went missing, there was an odd twist in the story. Randy Axziger, the man Corey Bobber was convinced was the Green River Killer, was arrested. But his arrest wasn't connected to the Green River killings, nor was it related to the murders of Kim and Anna or the disappearance of Misty. Instead, he was charged with sexually abusing 2 7-year-old girls. A year later, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. Bobber was convinced that this was proof that Axziger was a suspect worth investigating in the murder of the 2 girls and the disappearance of Misty. But the police did not consider him a suspect in those cases, and they continued to investigate Michael Reiner. It turned out that Reiner loved to ride ATVs. One place he often liked to ride was the field where the girls' bodies were found and where Misty's clothes were found. In April 1993, 7 months after Misty went missing, Reiner put the car he was driving on the night Misty went missing up for sale. An undercover police officer purchased the car and it was tested forensically. But it would be months before they got the results back. Reiner was interviewed by the police and he said he didn't know what happened to Misty. He also took a polygraph exam and he passed. So the detectives dropped him as a suspect. Then the police decided to take another look at a suspect that they had already cleared, Ruben Schmidt. They talked to Schmidt's roommate, and he said that about 5 minutes after Misty called, Schmidt left their home. He did not say where he was going. He returned a few hours later. Schmidt said that he had blacked out, and when he woke up, he was at his grandmother's home. Schmidt's roommate's answers were evidence that Schmidt was not at home at the time when Misty was presumably kidnapped. But the police never questioned Schmidt about where he went after Misty called. Then the police got the forensic report from Michael Reiner's car. No evidence was found in the car that connected him to Misty's disappearance. This further emphasized to the police that Reiner was not a suspect. They also did not think that Schmidt was a viable suspect either. Instead, they came up with a new suspect, Corey Bobber. At times, Misty's mother, Diana, had accused Bobber of killing her daughter. After all, just days before Misty disappeared, he predicted a girl would go missing from Puyallup, and he also led the search that resulted in some of Misty's clothes being found. The police thought that he was too right not to have been involved in Misty's murder. Bobber was asked to take a polygraph exam, and he refused. After that, no progress on any of the cases were made, and the cases went cold. In 2000, Diana had Misty declared dead. In November 2001, 52-year-old Gary Ridgway was arrested in connection with the Green River murders. In November 2003, he pleaded guilty to 48 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. He confessed to all 48 murders. His victims did not include Kim DeLange, Anna Chbetnoy, and Misty Copsey. DNA was found on Kim, and it was compared to Ridgway's DNA, and it was not a match. Also, red paint chips were found on Misty's jeans. For work, Ridgway had painted truck door panels. The paint chips that were found on Misty's jeans were compared to the paint Ridgway used, and it wasn't a match. So it's not believed that Ridgway was involved in the murders of Kim and Anna and the disappearance of Misty. Corey Bobber was convinced that the red paint chips were proof that Randy Axinger was involved in Misty's disappearance. When Misty went missing, Axinger owned a red Porsche. He sold it several years later. Bobber managed to track down the Porsche, and he convinced the police to do forensic tests on it. However, when a lab went to test the paint chips that were found on Misty's jeans, they discovered that the paint chips were missing. The paint chips have never been found. But fibers and hairs that were found on the jeans were compared to fibers and hairs found in the Porsche, and they were not a match. So the police are convinced that Axinger was not involved in the disappearance of Misty. Over the years, Reuben Schmidt has popped back up on the police's radar several times. In 1996, he was accused of sexually assaulting one of Misty's friends. As he was doing it, he held a pillow over her face to silence her. The girl ended up withdrawing the charges. She said she did not want to go through the trauma of a trial. Schmidt later got married and had children. Several years after getting married, his wife filed an order of protection against him. He had threatened to burn their home down, with her and their kids inside of it. Reuben Schmidt has never been charged in connection with Misty's disappearance, but the police consider him a person of interest. Some people believe that one killer is responsible for the murders of the 3 girls. Since 2 of the girls were last seen at the Hi-Ho shopping center, the killer is sometimes called the Hi-Ho Killer. His identity is still a mystery, but since the police have the killer's DNA, it may just be a matter of time before he's identified. However, it's not even clear if the murders of Kim and Anna are connected to Misty's disappearance. Fibers and hair that were found on Kim and Anna were compared to fibers and hairs that were found on Misty's jeans, and they were not a match. Then there are some people, including Misty's father, who are not even convinced that Misty is dead. Misty's mother, Diana, is convinced that her daughter is dead and is hoping that one day her daughter's remains will be found. She also hopes that her killer will be brought to justice. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, please go to criminallylisted.com where you can suggest cases, buy merch, and find out about an exclusive podcast. But that is all for today. Thank you again for watching.